And now, it's time for World of Prophecy with your host, former professor at the University of Texas at Austin, career United States Air Force officer, and best-selling author, Tex Mars.
Hello, friends. This is Tex Mars, and you're listening to another edition of World of Prophecy. Now, each week, right here on WWCR International Shortwave, going around the world, I usually interview a very special guest. And it's always a person that has something very, very important to say for the people of God. And sometimes he even has shocking things to say, startling things. Because you see in Ephesians 5, verse 11, it says, "Have no part with the works of darkness, but rather reprove them." That means that not only are we not to have any part with the works of the workers of darkness, the devil's people and his organizations, but actually, my friends, we're supposed to expose them, reprove them, unmask them. And it takes courage to do that. And I bring to you each week, right here, 9 p.m. Central in the United States, 9 p.m. Central, 9 to 10, 1 hour, on WWCR, frequency 7435, a man and sometimes a woman who has something special to tell you, a person who is fearless in standing up for the truth of God's Word. Now, tonight I have a good friend of mine. He is an author. We're offering his book, in fact, The Watchtower and the Masons, through this ministry. And he has another book he's authored. We're going to tell you about that as the program goes on. And he has an outstanding newsletter. And boy, it'll make your hair curl, your eyes turn red, and you'll have to get on your knees and pray for God to straighten your hair out again, and the red to leave your eyes. Vicine and Murine won't take the red out of your eyes after you've read Fritz Springmeier's newsletter in his book, because it unmasks darkness, but it uplifts Jesus Christ. Fritz Springmeier is from Portland, Oregon. He's attended West Point, the U.S. Military Academy, Rosedale Bible Institute. He's written many things, actually. He's written a 7-volume series on Christian doctrine. And he is really, God has called him to be an expert on exposing some things. Tonight we're going to talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses. Are they really a Christian group? Or are the Jehovah's Witnesses led by the devil? Freemasonry, is that just a nice mumbo-jumbo group of secret code words and handshakes by overgrown kids? Or is there a lot of darkness and evil in the secret society called Freemasonry? And then most of all, is there a connection between the Watchtower or the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Masons? Could that be so? You're going to find out right here on World of Prophecy. Fritz Springmeier, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Tex.
You know, the first time I read this book, boy, I have to tell you, I read it from page 1 all the way to the end, and it's around 230 pages or so or more, without stopping. It's a tremendous book, and God had to have inspired you. Fritz, what made you interested in this subject, the Watchtower and the Masons?
I was praying that the Lord would give me the capability to go after the very pinnacle, the top of the Watchtower Society, their headquarters, and chop off the authoritarian head of the Watchtower Society. And the Lord blessed my prayer by giving me inside information that the head of the Watchtower Society and the leaders of the LDS Church, that's Latter-day Saints in Salt Lake City, were collaborating together.
Wow.
So, yeah, wow. And I wanted to know, how can this be? And what's behind this? And I started looking into the history of both of the organizations and their leadership. And when one recognizes that Charles Taze Russell, who started the Jehovah's Witnesses, was a Freemason and came out of the Russell family, which is one of the top satanic bloodlines, and was interested in Egyptology. And then you compare that with Joseph Smith. He too was a Freemason, and he too came out of one of the top satanic bloodlines, and he too was very interested in Egyptology. And you start opening up a whole can of worms of where these organizations came from and what they're all about. And that's how I got started, is as an answer to prayer.
Well, Fritz, your book, I mean, this isn't just a book that talks. This is a book that is packed with facts, documents, illustrations. I mean, you prove your point here. You've gone back into the early Jehovah's Witnesses historical record here. You have copies of their programs, of the early publications.
Right.
I mean, this is some shocking information. Is there any other book in the world about that connects the Masonry and the Watchtower or the Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yes, and since this broadcast is going internationally, there is a book in German. It's called Die Zeugen Jehovas, eine Dokumentation über die Wachturmgesellschaft. And I didn't know about it at the time that I wrote the Watchtower and Masons, but a friend, he's become a friend of mine, wrote it. It's only in German, though.
Isn't that something?
And then there's a book that just recently came out. It's in Spanish, Precaución Testigos de Jehová, by Robin de Ruyter, and he quotes from my Watchtower and Masons book. So now there's something in German and in Spanish.
Wow, and here we have, now friends, we have the Watchtower and the Masons for your love gift of $12 to the Ministry of World of Prophecy, and we'll use it to keep bringing this message around the world. Love gift of $12, just add $2 postage and handling, total of $14, and all you have to do is call our 1-800 number here in the United States. That number is 1-800-234-9673. 1-800-234-9673. We're going to give you that number a little bit later in the program. For a copy of this book, it's over 200 pages, The Watchtower and the Masons by Fritz Springmeier. It will shock you. And I believe, Fritz, do you think that people can use this as a witnessing tool to both Masons and the Watchtower people?
Yes, it has brought some Jehovah's Witnesses to Christ. I got a letter that a woman who was part of the anointed of the Jehovah's Witnesses, that's the special category that's going to heaven, and the book made her cry, and she gave her life to Christ. And another letter came in to me that a whole family of Jehovah's Witnesses had turned their lives over to Christ because of it. So I really glorified the Lord for that harvest.
Well, I do too. And by the way, I want to mention, we're not only on WWCR, but we're being picked up by other stations as well, WRN, for example, and others. And we appreciate all of you listening to World of Prophecy. Fritz, this book, The Watchtower and the Masons, you mentioned that the founder, one of the founders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, is a man named Charles T. Russell.
Right.
And he has an occultic bloodline. You said he was involved in Egyptology. And on the cover of your book, there is like a pyramid. What does the Egyptian pyramid have to do with the founders of Jehovah's Witnesses?
That's a good question. Anyone who's familiar with the modern organization has the illusion that the Jehovah's Witnesses have nothing to do with the occult. So why is it that their founder, when he died, which was on Halloween night, which is mysterious too. Some people think that he was murdered or he was killed on Halloween night, perhaps even a ritual involved. But when he died, they had a Rosicrucian ceremony, and 3 days later, according to Rosicrucian beliefs, they went ahead and cremated him. They put the ashes underneath this huge, well, it's not huge in terms of like Egypt, but it's a granite, pink granite, by the way, because that was his favorite color, pink. They put his ashes underneath this pyramid. They also placed books and things for him in the afterlife.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, within the pyramid, and the pyramid had a capstone, and it had the Knights Templar logo, because Charles Taze Russell was a Knights Templar. They have the Knights Templar, Masonic Knights Templar logo on one side of this pyramid. And interestingly, they didn't want anybody to disturb things, because in the foundation to the pyramid, they put barbed wire. They used barbed wire as rebar so that nobody could even break through the foundation. Then they came along, and with a little bit of subterfuge, a few years later, they put in a tombstone a distance away so that people would think that he was buried out where the tombstone is.
Isn't that so? Now, where is this at, this pyramid? You might say the pyramid grave site of the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Charles Taze Russell had purchased a cemetery called Union Cemetery. It's in what's now Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
He purchased his own cemetery, huh?
Yeah, he purchased the whole cemetery. That's a real strange thing, because here we have a man who said that he had been preaching for years that he was going to be glorified in 1914. Well, that's their terminology for what Christians call being raptured. He was not going to die, supposedly, according to his teachings. And yet, at the same time he's teaching this, he's got a cemetery.
Right. And not only that, now, but he prophesied basically that he would not die till 1914. He would be glorified and raptured up, but he died before that date, huh?
Well, no, actually the date came and went, and it happened. They were waiting at Bethel headquarters, and it came and it went, and nothing happened, and then 1916 on Halloween, he died.
I guess the devil had a little bit more work for him to do for 2 more years. Well, Freemasonry. You mentioned this pyramid gravesite. This actually has a capstone even. There's the Knights Templar of Freemasonry, the symbol, and that's right on the front of your book here. You got a picture inside the book of that, so that's totally indisputable. So we have the Freemasonry connection then, don't we?
Yes. There are some people that actually have a copy of his Masonic membership, but the one that I know of in particular is hostile to Christians. But I know 3 Christians who have managed to see the membership certificate. The actual storage place for his Masonic records are in Ireland, because it was a lodge in Ireland that chartered the lodge in Pennsylvania that he belonged to. So the records always go back to the mother lodges.
Well, at this time, Fritz, a lot of people may be saying, well, wait just a minute. What's the matter with the Masons? They do wonderful works. They have the Shriners Hospitals to help kids. I mean, come on now. What is? I mean, you've done research. You know. What basically are the Freemasons all about?
Well, Tex, the first thing that I would tell our listeners is initially when you join Freemasonry, 2 things happen. The first thing is that you fill out a sheet of paper asking to be initiated into the mysteries. And if you will check any reputable Masonic source, Manly P. Hall, Albert Pike, on and on, you will find that the mysteries are the mystery religions. So the first thing that you do to become a Mason is you request to be initiated into the mystery religions of Babylon. The next thing you do is to take, on penalty of a gruesome death, an oath to keep all of the secrets, to never reveal and always conceal the secrets of Freemasonry. Those two things right there are items that a born-again follower of Christ cannot do.
Yes, didn't Jesus say to take no oaths?
That's right. And then beyond that, Jesus said, no one can serve two masters. Either he'll hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. That's a quote out of Matthew 6. And it's so true. As one gets involved with the lodge, it'll consume more and more of one's time. It will consume one's allegiance. And the Christian will, if he is a Christian and unwittingly joins, will end up compromising and quenching the spirit.
Well, so it's basically a spiritual killer. The question I would have is this, the rituals, the 33 degrees, for example, of the Scottish Rite. At what point there do those people, are they initiated to such an extent that, it's almost undeniable that Lucifer is the god of the lodge? At what point do you think? Is it the second or third degree? Do they get it earlier? Is it up in the final 33rd degree, or what?
I get asked that question a lot, and what I tell people is that it depends upon the individual. The real astute individual will realize what he's getting into right at the first degree, because like I just mentioned, you're asking to be initiated into the mystery religions, and anyone who knows what the mystery religions are know what that involves.
Yeah, Fritz, one visit to a New Age bookstore and you learn what the mystery religions are, right? I guess a person who's been involved in the New Age and has now become a Christian and then is invited to a Mason would right away say, wait, this is New Age occultism, wouldn't he?
Right. And then when one reaches the 32nd degree, he is given a book by Albert Pike, Morals and Dogma. And Albert Pike is very clear that in his book, in his writings, that Lucifer is the light bearer. So, again, that should right there be a clear indication of what a person is getting into. When someone joins the Masonic Lodge, they are welcome to go to the Lodge library and read Masonic scholars and Masonic philosophers. If a person does that, they will very soon become acquainted that a lot of the very important Masonic philosophers are Luciferians, like Manly P. Hall and Albert Pike and quite a number of others. So a person, if they're alert, should know fairly quickly. But a lot of people go through life without really asking what they're doing. And if that's the case, they should be able to, if they have blinders on and don't really think, they might be able to progress to the 32nd degree without realizing what they're in. Now, one doesn't progress on his own up to the 33rd degree. You are chosen. They reach down and pull you out. And they are watching you as you climb through the degrees, and they know which are men that they can trust and will be dedicated to their anti-Christian agenda. And so when they reach down and choose you for the 33rd degree, then you get into actually finding out they're rather blatant what their anti-Christian agenda is at that point.
You use the term anti-Christian agenda, and I think that's very astute and wise. Is Freemasonry really, in terms of being religion, is it really based, in your book you talk a lot about the what I would call the Jewish Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism, really Jewish occultism,
right,
of the Jews, totally opposite what Jesus Christ taught, of course. Is this the religion of the Masonic Lodge?
Yes, according to Albert Pike, who's they have Albert Pike's statue at their headquarters in Washington, D.C. His picture is plastered over all kinds of issues of their New Age journal, and he's been called the Pope of Freemasonry, and he very clearly has spelled out in a number of places in his Morals and Dogma that Freemasonry is based on the Kabbalah, which, as you correctly indicated, is simply just Jewish magic.
Jewish magic. And where did the Jews get that from? I mean,
Babylon.
Back to Babylon again, huh? Okay, mystery teachings of Babylon, like you were saying, Fritz. So the Jews became apostate, and of course they were brought into captivity. Jeremiah the prophet prophesied that they had gone evil, and the people were not truly worshiping. They were worshiping, in fact, the mother goddess of Babylon, baking cakes to her and giving cake offerings, the women in the temple. And because of their apostasy and these evil things they had brought into God's very temple, they were brought captive in Babylon. Do you suppose that it was at that time that the Talmudic teachings, the Jewish Kabbalah and mysticism crept into the Jewish religion, Judaism, and then they brought it back from Babylon when they were released by Cyrus 70 years later? Is that possible?
Yes, that's definitely true. Now, a lot of the magic and occultism and Satanism that they brought back was done very secretly, and it was passed in a traditional way, orally. It wasn't until later that they codified and wrote it down. Even in Jesus' time, from the indications, at least my research, and as I understand it now, even in Jesus' time, your religious leaders were only putting on a pretense. A lot of them were into the occult.
You know, that makes so much sense, Fritz, what you're saying. You know, in the Bible there, where the man was born blind, and his disciples asked Jesus, when Jesus encountered this man, he was born blind, as I recall, from birth. Mm-hmm. And they asked Jesus, was, this affliction from the time he was born this way, they said, is this because of something he did? Some sin he did before he was born? Or was it because his parents had sinned that he was born this way? In other words, they were asking, in a previous reincarnated life, this guy gathered up some negative karma, bad karma, and now in this life he had to be born blind. Evidently, they had bought into this Jewish, mystical, magical Kabbalah teachings. I'm not saying the disciples had, but they were actually questioning Jesus. So that teaching must have been prevalent then there in Jerusalem and throughout Israel, perverting the Mosaic laws. Am I off course there?
No, you're not off course. It also relates to something else, and that is the occult. The word occult or esoteric or arcane means hidden. Mm-hmm. And so the people that practice a lot of these types of occult activities, they are occult. They're hidden. A lot of them will put on a front, a cover, and then secretly do something else. And I highly suspect from what I can gather, and I'd still like to do some more research on it, but what I can gather that the Pharisees and some of these others had a front of being biblical based, but were actually practicing very evil things in secret.
That is true. That's very biblical. I think it's Ezekiel chapter 8. An amazing thing. God told him to dig in the walls. In other words, just start digging in the wall there and dig a hole and look inside and see what the priests of the temple do in their hidden things.
Yes.
And there Ezekiel did what God told him to do, and he dug in the wall, and he looked in, and I mean, they were worshiping the most ungodly things. They were doing it, though, in a secret chamber. I mean, the astrological symbols, all of the Mystery Babylon things, they were even hiding it from the common people. They were really Satanists and Freemasons of their time, you might say.
Yes.
That's one man, when I didn't realize that was exactly that graphic in the Bible. And a man came up to me, Fritz, at a prophecy conference, and he said, "Texture, have you ever read Ezekiel 8?" I said, well, I'll have to reread it again. He said, "Well, if you want to know what goes on in Freemasonry lodges today, just go back and see what was happening there in Ezekiel."
Yes.
Boy, did I have an awakening. Well, one of the things, if we're connecting Jehovah's Witnesses with Freemasonry, you brought up the fact that Charles Russell, the founder, was a Mason. He was a Knights Templar, which is a special kind of elite Mason. Then there's another man named Judge Rutherford. Tell us about Judge Rutherford. And you mentioned in your book he had a very, let's just say, a very different belief about whether Satan and Lucifer were the same character. What about that?
Okay, that's several questions. Rutherford had the pretense of being anti-Mason, but and at first I bought into that, and I thought, well, he's against the Masons. But then I found out that he had worked for three times. He had been part of William Jennings Bryan's presidential campaign, and William Jennings Bryan happened to be a high-ranking Mason. And then I found out that a lot of Rutherford's close friends, like a Jewish Senator, George Lewis Wellington, who was a banker and a president of an electric company, he was a 32-degree Freemason and an Odds Fellow, and he gave Rutherford political pull. And then there were some other close friends of Rutherford, too, that were not Jehovah's Witnesses but were Masons. And so I had to reevaluate what I had seen on the surface and realize that there was more to things than what met the eye at first. Rutherford himself was a strange character in that he said that angels were bringing him messages, and when he described these angels, he said that these angels were working out their salvation, that they were evil angels, but that because they were busy bringing messages to him, that God was going to wipe their sins clean because they were working out their salvation.
Wow. I tell you, hold that thought. I want you to tell people more about Judge Rutherford, one of the early founders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and some of the occultism that you have researched and uncovered. When we come back, Fritz, on World of Prophecy. But right now, my friends, we're going to go for a break, and my very precious wife, Wanda, is going to tell you how to get a subscription to Flashpoint, our monthly newspaper, our newsletter, and the same phone number she's going to tell you about, and the address here in the United States is where you can obtain this fascinating and very important book, The Watchtower and the Masons, by my guest, Fritz Springmeier. You stay with us. After this message, more on occultism, Freemasonry, the Jehovah's Witnesses. You're listening to Tex Mars and World of Prophecy. Welcome back to World of Prophecy, my friends. This is Tex Mars. We're on WWCR. We're on WRN. We're on other stations across America, and folks are listening around the globe. And I know a lot of you are very excited about what you're hearing. The Watchtower and the Masons. Is there an occult connection? My special guest, Fritz Springmeier from Portland, Oregon. And I hope you have your pencil or pen and some paper handy, because Fritz Springmeier has a newsletter that he sends out. And I'll tell you, he works very hard on it. It's almost like a book sometime. I read it immediately when I get it. I take it home with me. If I get it later in the day in the mail, I want to read it right away, because there's always something that's fascinating in it, inspiring, and I believe that you'd like to have a copy of it. It'll be a great blessing to you. Fritz, you have a box number there in Portland. Would you mind giving out that box number to folks? And you told me before the program that people could write and even get a complimentary copy,
Right.
and that's very generous of you. Maybe, folks, let's help Fritz with the printing, maybe $3, $5, even though he's not requiring it. Just tuck in a little love gift there to help Fritz Springmeier with the printing. I'll tell you, you won't be disappointed if you ask for this newsletter from Fritz Springmeier. So how can people get that? How can they contact you, Fritz?
P.O. Box 86694. That's 86694. Portland, Oregon 97286.
Okay, now that's P.O. Box 86694, Portland, Portland, Oregon, just O-R is fine. The initials O-R for Oregon. And that zip code is 97286. Ask for a free copy of Fritz Springmeier's newsletter. But as I said, if you're led by the Holy Spirit and you can, please just give a love gift. It can be $10, $20, $3, $2, $1, whatever God would lead you. And I think you'll be blessed by it. Fritz, you have another book. I have a copy of it. It is I call it the Wow book, W-O-W. And it's called Be Wise as a Serpent. How much is that? If people wanted to go ahead, it's 800 pages. I want to tell people, it may sound like a big price, but imagine 800 pages of research. And this isn't, as I said, just discussion. This is heavy-duty research, and yet it's written in such an interesting way that anyone of whatever educational level can get great enjoyment and a blessing from it. Be Wise as a Serpent. Can they get that from the same address, and how much would that be, Fritz?
$60.
$30?
$60.
Okay. $60. So maybe some of you out there are researchers. This is something you need for your library. $60. A hardcover book now is $25, $30 at a B. Dalton or a Walden, but this is 800 pages. And I understand, Fritz, you're going to break this up, and it may end up, you'll republish this as 4 books. So in a sense, they're getting 4 books for $60, right?
Right.
And I highly recommend it. Be Wise as a Serpent. You Christian researchers, Bible students, it's a great book for you. I recommend it. Pastors, for your library, please get it. Well, Fritz, back on target now about Freemasonry, the Jehovah's Witnesses. You mentioned that even the Mormons, the Latter-day Saints, had an early Masonic connection until there was a break there. I have a question for you. This is, I'm going to put you right on the hot seat here, but I think you can take it because God's right behind you. But let's put you, Fritz Springmeier, on the hot seat. Does Freemasonry or some other secret group today, 1993 to 1994, control the Jehovah's Witnesses?
My conclusion is yes. And I give one of the men that I think they do it through. Traditionally or publicly, people have the idea that the governing body controls the Watchtower Society. But insiders and people that are ex-insiders from Bethel headquarters give a different picture. There happens, well, recently, the president of the Watchtower Society, Frederick Franz, died, and he was about, I think, 99 years old when he died, and for many years he had not been able to see or get around. And there happened to be an Iraqi Jew named Salih who was his mouthpiece. And every time somebody wanted to know what Frederick Franz's orders were, they asked this guy, and this guy would go into Frederick Franz's room and then come out with the answer. We have a blind man in his 90s supposedly running this organization.
Sounds like Howard Hughes, in his last days, the recluse, and had other people to operating his huge empire.
Right, and
boy,
in the financial department of the Watchtower Society is more or less a law unto itself. There's a lot of hidden politics going on, and connections to some of the very powerful elite in the world. There's connections between the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Morgans to the Watchtower Society, and all of these type of connections make me conclude that yes, the Watchtower Society is being controlled very quietly from the outside. One of the things that might be a little bit eye-opening is that the same people that brought Hitler to power, for instance, Prescott Bush, who was in the Skull and Bones, his son is George Bush. Prescott Bush and the Harrimans were very influential in financing Hitler to power. And a lot of those people are still influential today. And when we realize that Hitler intended for the Jehovah's Witnesses to be the religion of Russia when he conquered Russia, the Nazis rounded up the Jehovah's Witnesses and interned them, and a lot of people don't realize that that was with a secret motive. They were going to take all of the Jehovah's Witnesses that they had rounded up, and Himmler was going to settle them in Russia after they conquered Russia, and he wanted to turn Russia into one nation of Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's just incredible.
Now, when we consider that the same people, or the same type of people, the Skull and Bone Society and everything, are now in charge of this New World Order, what are their intentions with the Watchtower Society in the future?
Well, that's here you've connected your book. I'll tell you, folks, the Watchtower and the Masons. This book, you need this book. Gift of $12. Add $2 postage. Call us at 1-800-234-9673. Write to us and send a check or money order. 1708 Patterson, Patterson Road, Austin, Texas, Austin, Texas, 78733. Fritz, you talked about the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, this connection, the Freemasons. These are the same people, aren't they, that gave us the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, the World Council of Churches?
Yes.
What's going on? Why would they found some years ago a cult group, a pretend type of Christianity called the Jehovah's Witnesses? What was their motive?
Basically, they hate Christ. When one gets in and looks at what the Jehovah's Witnesses are teaching, they attack all of the fundamental beliefs of the Christians. They attack the resurrection of Christ. They attack the deity of Christ, and on and on and on through as you go through. Now, part of why the connections between Freemasonry and the Watchtower Society are a little bit obscured is because some of the teachings that they had back in Charles Taze Russell's time have changed. And in the Watchtower and Masons book, I go through and I show at least 35 parallel beliefs one of the things that Charles Ferguson, who wrote a book on the Freemasons, he said that what Freemasonry did, and this is just such an awesome statement that I might repeat it here. He said, Freemasonry had the supreme dexterity to replace a mysterious divinity with a divine mystery. And that's exactly what Charles Taze Russell did. He was always talking about the divine plan, the divine mystery. And so if we're watching current events, you'll notice that the ADL was behind the Waco incident.
Yeah, the Jewish Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith. That's right.
The B'nai B'rith was one of the organizations that supported the Watchtower Society financially when they got started. And the man Frank Goldman, who became president of B'nai B'rith, was real buddies with Charles Taze Russell. Charles Taze Russell did a lot of work to support their program in turn. He was one of the earliest Zionists, and the Watchtower Society gave out lots of free Zionist literature.
So the Jehovah's Witnesses was really then a Zionist organization in that they supported Jewish Zionism.
Right.
This was in the early days, of course, before even the modern-day nation of Israel was founded.
Right.
So I suppose then what you're saying is that the Jewish, or the B'nai B'rith, now known as the Jewish Anti-Defamation League, and I want to, folks, you say, well, now wait just a minute, isn't that a good organization? You have to understand, recently the San Francisco Police Department raided the offices of the Jewish ADL. Why? Because they've been carrying on, allegedly, a spying operation and snooping on people, private detectives, even paying off police detectives, police officers to smuggle to them secret information on people. I mean, this is a terrible group. So for Fritz Springmeier to expose the fact that this same really shadowy group, the Jewish ADL, was holding hands with the founders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, well, what can I say, except Jesus didn't say this, but you know the old maxim, Fritz, birds of a feather flock together. Goodness gracious, this is, there's so much here. You said that the Jehovah's Witnesses really deny all of the basics of the historic Christian faith. Now, they have their own Bible translation, right?
Yes.
You talk about that in your book.
That in Hosea 12:14, I think, if I'm remembering the verse correctly, they quote Adonai, which should always be translated Lord. They translate Adonai as Grand Master.
Say that again.
And I believe
please repeat that.
Very subtle notice to other Freemasons where they are.
Now there's Adonai, which is Hebrew would mean I suppose Lord, the Lord.
Right.
And they interpret it in their. I mean, they don't use the King James version of the Bible. They have their own called the New World. And in your book, and what you're saying on the air here, is the word Adonai is translated, rather than Lord, it's Grand Master, such as Grand Master of the Lodge.
That's in one place in Hosea. Now, none of the other places do they translate it incorrectly. So, but you and I know that with these secret societies, they're always trying to send out little secret signals here and there.
Oh, absolutely, and there's no doubt there's a reason for it even to be in that place. John 1, the Gospel of John, chapter 1. Where did the Jehovah's Witnesses, the character of Jesus and who he is, what is the difference in this perverted Bible translation of the Jehovah's Witnesses and, for example, the King James Version? I mean, who is Jesus according to the Jehovah's Witnesses?
He is merely a man. In fact, they go a little bit further than that and say that originally he was Michael the Archangel, and then constructed an angel, and that they have a very limited view of God, and they have a very limited view of Jesus. I would like to take off on that point there, because a lot of people, even most of the Jehovah's Witnesses today, do not realize that for many years the Watchtower Society has had the teaching that God lived on the star Alcyone in the Pleiades. Now today in the New Age movement, you will hear a lot about the Pleiadians. These are the supposedly all of the a large share of the aliens that are being experienced by the New Agers.
The UFO extraterrestrials and such, huh?
Right. Well, the Watchtower Society was one of the first New Age religions, and they believed that they were getting messages from the Pleiades. And this was, again, what I was referring to, the angels that Rutherford thought were giving him messages. Both Russell and Rutherford, and also Franz, because he was in the society at the time, believed that this. And Rutherford wrote a book called Angels, where he talks about fallen angels. And to quote his exact words, he says, "There is some hope of their recovery."
There's the devil can be rehabilitated, says the Jehovah's Witness founder. Huh? Oh my! Well,
their God is not the God of the Christians. It's a very limited God that according to their doctrine, which also taps into some of the mystery religion ideas and Gnosticism, was that God had to turn over the world to Satan, and he's just turned it over for 6,000 years.
Well, in a sense, of course, Satan is God, small g, of this world, but I wouldn't quite say that he owns it. I mean, for example, you and I as Christians, do you fear the devil because he's God of this world, Fritz?
No.
Well, amen. I don't either. I have no fear of him or his agents whatsoever. They mean nothing to me.
Right.
They can't touch you or I, can't do one thing. We're exposing this. I suppose there are many people that would like to just turn, throw us in prison and throw away the key. I'm sure I'd be amazed if the government isn't tracking you and all of the things that you've exposed. But we have no fear. This is the most wonderful thing, isn't it, about being a Christian? No fear of the devil.
Right. Our God is sufficient, and he shall supply all of our needs according to his riches in glory.
Wow.
And we can do all things through Christ, which strengthens us.
Isn't that great? We can do all things through Christ, and they strengthen us. Well, that's pretty great. Well, okay, we're going to go back here now again. At one point you say in your book that one of the founders, Judge Rutherford,
right,
of the Jehovah's Witnesses, believed that Satan and Lucifer were not the same entity?
Right.
And
in fact, that's in a slightly changed way of looking at things that still continues. They don't use the word Lucifer for Satan. They go to the Old Testament and they say that Lucifer was merely a man, a king. But Rutherford himself had a different belief altogether, and it approaches a little bit more your Mormon idea, where Christ and Satan were brothers.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the Mormons, they tell me, oh no, we don't believe they were brothers. We just think they were of the same essence.
Yeah. As
if that made a difference. I had never thought much about it being of the same essence at all. God is God, and he's sort of separate from everything. So Satan and Lucifer are not the same entity. Lucifer is just a king, and boy, isn't that really convenient? I mean, the Bible in Isaiah, for example, points out that the destination of Lucifer is the pit. But of course, that's only the King James Version. Other versions have taken out even the name Lucifer. This is commonly held by many liberals today, that Lucifer and Satan are not even the same entity.
Right.
And yet the Jehovah's Witnesses, according to your research, taught this early on.
Yes.
What is, in the grand scheme of things, by these conspirators who founded this false Christian religion, so-called Christian religion, in the grand scheme of things, Fritz Springmeier, what is their motive? What was their motive, and what is it now?
Well, they've used the Watchtower Society for a succession of purposes. The original purpose is no longer what they're using it for. Today, they're the shock troops. The Jehovah's Witnesses are one of the leading religions in the world, and here in the United States, we may not perceive it that way because they're a minority religion, but in some countries, they are one of the largest religions, and they're going to every door, and they're bringing their message, and their message is one that says that God is going to destroy the Christian people. And why is because, obviously, according to their teachings, the Christian people are satanic. That's what they teach, and so they're teaching all of these things that are going to happen, and they're conditioning the people to accept when the New World Order takes over, and they arrest all the Christians and they arrest all of these non-compliant government officials. People are going to accept that as something from God.
And they say they're building the kingdom right here on earth, right?
Yes, they're building a new order.
A new order.
They call it.
That sounds a little bit like the New World Order.
Yeah, sometimes they've even called it the New World Order.
The New World Order.
I have asked Jehovah's Witnesses the last few years directly. I've said, is the New World Order something good or something bad, just to see what they would say. And they would always say the New World Order is very good.
It's something good. So they're kingdom builders then. They obviously then do they not believe, well, I suppose they believe in Armageddon and things like that to get rid of we old mean Christians, right?
Yes.
And then they can go on that they're the 144,000 Jehovah's Witnesses building their New World Order.
Yes, I was really shocked when I really got in to find out what Charles Taze Russell was teaching. I found out that in one of his writings, he let's see, it was in the Watchtower magazine of February 15th of 1915 on page 59. He said that the difference. He said that the difference between Samuel and occult powers and the occult powers of others today is this: Samuel's were manifested under divine direction at a time when God was pleased to use such powers amongst his people Israel. Powers which doubtless will be in exercise also to some extent during the millennial age for the world's guidance. So what he's saying there, to repeat in my own words, what he's saying is Charles Taze Russell was teaching that when the new age, the millennial reign here on earth took place, that occult powers would be used by God.
Well, that really is a perversion. Well, Fritz, this has just really been so wonderful to have you on the program to talk about this subject. And there's so much here. We could easily go on for another hour. I hope you'll be my guest again later on World of Prophecy, maybe even to discuss Be Wise as a Serpent, your other book.